Alright, guys, we gotta take another ride on the old news train here because we gotta talk about Pokemon. Last month, they had two different little video presentations called Pokemon Presents, where they made a few mostly minor announcements. Nothing real thrilling in either one of them. I'm going to go through the things they talked about real quickly here, and then this is this is probably going to turn into more of a rant about just the general state of this franchise. But anyway, so the first one was on June 17th, where they announced four things. The first of which was, it wasn't really a game, it's a little smartphone app called Pokemon Smile. Which, I mean, what can you say about it? All it is just a little thing to try to get kids to brush their teeth. It's targeted at very, very, very young children. It is what it is. I don't really have much else to say about that. So that was the first thing they showed. The next thing is yet another mobile game because, fuck, that's all we can get anymore. So it's called Pokemon Cafe Mix. It's already out. It's just another little puzzle game spin-off with a horrible art style, by the way. I was not a fan of that. But more mobile trash to throw on the pile. And then the third thing, which was the major announcement from the first one, which I know this made a lot of people happy. Finally, after all these years, we are getting a new Pokemon Snap game for the Switch, which is titled, look out, New Pokemon Snap. I can only imagine how many hours they had to lock themselves in their building and, diligently come up with this very interesting name. But yeah, anyway, so that's coming out. I know that made a lot of people happy. I know that the original Snap on Nintendo 64 was pretty popular. I know a lot of people really love that game. As for me personally, I have played it. It's alright, but it's not nearly as good as people try to make it out to be. I think that game is actually pretty overrated. So, this didn't particularly get me excited, but it was de facto just the best announcement during all of this, just simply because it was the one and only actual proper spin-off game announced during all of this, which those are getting fewer and further between all the time. But anyway, the last thing they showed during the first one was just a little bit more info on the Isle of Armor DLC for Sword and Shield, which is already out. I'll talk about that briefly here, give my thoughts on that, because I don't really want to make a separate video for it. I have watched a full playthrough of the Isle of Armor. It pretty much fell in line with what my expectations for it was, which really isn't a good thing because my expectations were really fucking low. But, you can take that how you will. So, it had very little storyline content. No other new Pokemon or new regional variants or anything other than Galarian Slowbro, who finally got fully revealed. Which I do like his design. He does look nice. But other than that, there wasn't really a whole lot to it. They did two things that I thought was pretty good. I'll give them credit for two things. The first of which was they actually fixed one of the issues I had with the base games, where you couldn't bestow the Gigantamax factor onto any of your Pokemon. They added an item in this DLC called Max Soup, I think, that you could use on your Pokemon and actually give them the Gigantamax factor. So if you had like a sentimental Pokemon or some old one you brought in from your old games and you wanted them to be able to Gigantamax, you could use that on them. So they solved that issue. And then the other thing that they actually improved on was the map design. Since the entire Isle of Armor was set up like the wild area with the movable camera and everything, except this time they actually made it closer to what the wild area should have been. They actually had different areas to explore and some caves and some forests and some sort of pseudo tiny dungeons. They actually added a lot more explorability and things to discover in it instead of just being a giant fuck field with barely anything in it like the original wild area. So that was an improvement at least. But other than that, I was very much unimpressed by this DLC. And now, of course, we gotta wait for the Crown Tundra that's coming later this year, which I think will probably end up being a little bit better quality than this one was, but I still don't think it's gonna like save these games or anything. So anyway, back to the actual Pokemon Presents. The second one they had on June 24th, a week later, which the second one was entirely dedicated to one announcement, which was, you guessed it, yet again, another mobile spin-off game. This one called Pokemon Unite, which it's just a MOBA is all it is. It's a shitty game, but that's not the main issue here because this game, unlike the other ones, this one is being made in partnership with Tencent, which anyone who follows gaming news closely has heard the name Tencent before. You know that it's a very large company based out of China. You know that they have direct ties to the Chinese Communist government. And you know that they have a very poor reputation for their business practices and their quality of games and the things that they do in China, as well as internationally now, since they're investing more and more in nearly all of the larger Western publishers as well. So the Pokemon Company is partnered with China. And of all fucking times to pick to do it, I mean, Jesus. You're gonna partner with China when the sentiment against the Chinese government is possibly stronger than it's ever been right now. So, this was not the best idea. The video of this actually got ratioed repeatedly because they took it down and re-uploaded it once or twice, I think. And every time they put it back up, it got ratioed again. So, the fan reaction to this was very much not positive. Of course, I don't know how much of a difference that's going to make. The fan reaction to Dexit was very much not positive either, and look how that turned out. So, how successful this game ends up being is anyone's guess. I'm not going to venture a guess myself. I will say that the best thing that could possibly happen is if this game is a massive failure. That would be the best for this franchise. I hope that this thing does not become a large revenue stream for them. I hope it doesn't just explode in popularity like Go did or something. I'm pretty sure it won't. But if this thing ends up becoming a powerful revenue stream for them, then that's going to cause a lot more problems down the road. Which, speaking of, the main thing I noticed when I was watching both these presentations was that there was just an overwhelming feeling of disappointment because these two presentations pretty much perfectly summed up the current state of this franchise. And it's not good. I've ranted to no end about how bad Sword and Shield are, about how much I was displeased with deck sets and the whole removing the national decks and not having all the Pokemon being available, among other things. But that was sort of the big impetus that began the backlash towards these games. But over the last few months, it's become really apparent that the national decks isn't even the biggest issue anymore. I've seen a lot of people speculating that there might end up being a second expansion pass for Sword and Shield next year, which no, I don't think there will be. But let's say I'm wrong, and they actually do have a second expansion pass. It adds in the rest of the Pokemon to complete the National Dex. It adds Mega Evolution back in. It adds Z moves back in. It adds all the regular moves they removed back in. It adds all the missing crap back in, and it is, full of content. That's still not going to save Sword and Shield. People need to understand this. The National Dex can't even save these games anymore. It's gone beyond that. The main issue now is honestly home. Pokemon Home is a much bigger problem than the National Dex not being there, or the map design, or the shitty mechanic that'll get removed next gen anyway, or any of the other issues with this game. Graphics, the fucking, 16-bit tree, I don't give a fuck. The main issue has become home. Because home is the epitome of the negative anti-consumer business practices that they've been doing recently. It forces you to pay for not one but two separate cloud-based subscription apps in order to do functionality in a game that should have been there to begin with. This is a huge problem, and the fact that people are glossing over that and paying these subscriptions anyway is the ultimate symbol of why this franchise has very little hope of getting any better in the future. And now it's spreading even worse to, well, really, it's spreading to the main series now. It didn't start with the main series. It started really with the spin-offs going downhill, which you again could see in these presentations. All the spin-offs except one that they talked about were just more mobile garbage. Now, this all started with the massive success of Pokemon Go. Now, Pokemon Go came out 4 years ago in 2016, which I went back and researched this a little bit because I wanted to get exact numbers. I knew it skewed heavily in one direction, but I wanted to be precise about this. And I found something sort of interesting. If you look at the period of time from when Go came out up until now, we have had a total of 13 Pokemon spin-off games either released or announced to be released. Now, out of these 13 games, only 5 are actual proper spin-off games and not mobile garbage. Which on the surface doesn't sound too bad. But let's delve a little deeper, and you'll notice that 2 of the 5 aren't even out yet. One of them is the Pokemon Snap sequel that was announced here, and the other one is the Detective Pikachu sequel on Switch that was announced a good while ago, which they haven't talked any more about. But anyway, so 2 of them aren't out. One of them is a port of a spin-off from 2015 in the pre-Go era, and one of them is a remake of a spin-off game from 2006, very much before the Go era. So that means they've only gotten one actual proper spin-off game in the last 4 years post Go release, which is the original Detective Pikachu on Nintendo 3DS. Now, to put this in context, let's go back and look at the 4 years prior to Go's release. So, beginning of 2012 through 2016. During that period, there was a total of 11 Pokemon spin-off games released. And out of those 11, only 2 of them were mobile or mobile-style free-to-play bullshit games, which was Pokemon Shuffle and Pokemon Picross. This is not counting Pokemon Rumble World, because it was like that to begin with, but then they gave it a physical release later that unfucked it. So, we'll give it a pass. And Picross kind of gets half a pass, because I think if you spend like a certain amount of money on it, it unfucks itself and basically becomes a normal game too. So, is kind of on the fence. But anyway, that means prior to Go, 4 years prior, we had 9 out of 11 spin-off games being actual proper games. Now you can argue quality all you want, but proper spin-off titles. Versus only at most 5 out of 13 post-Go. And most of those are related to previous games already in some fashion. That's a pretty drastic difference. And the reason for this change is because that the mobile games are just a lot more profitable. They are low effort titles. They can have a much smaller budget, and they rake in a ton more money from a bunch of brain dead morons who don't have enough sense to realize that mobile games are literally designed to be bad and to rip you out of money. Which is ultimately the problem here. The problem isn't so much the Pokemon Company. The problem isn't so much Game Freak. The problem is the fan base. Because it's a fan base's responsibility, a fandom's responsibility, to keep these companies in line and to make them pursue the things that they should be pursuing and not careening off a cliff into an anti-consumer shithole, which is what has been consistently happening to Pokemon over the last few years. But we don't have a fandom that actually holds any accountability to these companies. We have a fandom that sucks off these companies at every opportunity, that tries to do every sort of mental gymnastics known to man in order to justify these terrible products. People that will fork over money for literally any turd with the word Pokemon stamped on it. Sword and Shield are awful games. I won't even say they're the worst games in the series, because technically they are, I guess, still better than the Let's Go titles. But Sword and Shield, I believe currently are the 4th highest selling main series titles we've ever had. And they've sold 17 point some odd million titles, I believe. The last I checked, there might be more up-to-date numbers that I haven't seen yet. But they're right behind Diamond and Pearl, which is in the number 3 slot. And they're nipping at Diamond and Pearl's ass. So they're probably going to end up passing those titles and taking the number 3 spot too. When titles that are this poorly made, this low effort, this anti-consumer in their design are able to sell that much off of nostalgia and brand loyalty alone, that represents a very large problem, because that means that the fan base has been taken over by the more casual market, by people that don't necessarily have the best interest of the franchise in mind. And that is never a good thing, because that only leads to declining quality over time, which we are seeing here. Now, I see people still begging and pleading for Diamond and Pearl remakes. People were complaining during the Pokémon Presents that they didn't talk about any Diamond and Pearl remakes during this. If you're a fan of Diamond and Pearl, if you're a fan of Gen 4 in general, you have to be out of your fucking mind to be wanting those games to be remade right now. With the current state of affairs going on, there is no way that any sorts of Diamond and Pearl Gen 4 remake is going to turn out good. It's just not going to happen. You know they're going to jam some sort of very loose explanation for why Dynamax is in the Sinnoh region for no reason. You know those games are still going to have to be compatible with Pokemon Home and have to deal with all the problems that come along with that. You know those games are going to be very much simplified and have a lot of features removed, even more so than Oris, which I see people complaining about things being removed from Oris, like the Battle Frontier and stuff. or it's had its issues, but at least it still ended up being a quality title overall. It failed to be the definitive Hoenn experience like the remakes that come before it did for their respective regions. But a Diamond and Pearl remake that come along right now would not only fail to be the definitive Sinnoh experience, it would fail to be a positive experience at all, in my belief. That is my prediction. Nothing would please me more than to be proved wrong in this. I drastically hope that I am wrong. I hope I look like a fucking idiot next year when we get a wonderful game that's just fantastic, but I just do not see it happening. I know this is really negative. I know I sound very black-pilled at the moment, but honestly, I am pretty black-pilled about the future of this franchise. There is nothing on the horizon and no reason whatsoever to suggest that things are going to be getting any better anytime soon. We have a complacent fan base, we have declining quality in both the main and spin-off series, and we have a Pokemon company that is more than willing to continue to pump out trash and take your money in as many ways as possible for an increasingly inferior product. And then they're going to take that money and they're going to give it to the Chinese government and a bunch of race-baiting con artists here in the States. All the while, they're going to have an army of shills and brain-dead morons cheering them on every step of the way. So it's really unfortunate what this series has become. It makes me sad to see what my favorite franchise that I've had for pretty much my entire life has turned into. And I just have very little hope for the future of this franchise at the moment. But anyway, that's all I got to say. So, lots of luck to you and yours.